Hey everybody, this is Dream. I'm not sure if there's some echo in this, so if there is, can you let me know in the comments below? Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It really helps the channel a lot. Let's go ahead and get into the slate. So we have a massive 12-game Major League Baseball slate today. Pitching is very rough. We might have some weather issues as well, so you're going to have to check back closer to the time on the weather. With that said, we do have a big slate. We do have a lot of good options across the board. However, some teams are very expensive today. So obviously, let's get into our pitchers here. We're gonna start with Mr. Gosman for Toronto. Now he is in a good matchup here against Washington, though he's been inconsistent this season and lately, especially with having a few games over 20 fantasy points in the last 8 starts. He hasn't had a lot of high-end games. He is capable of a good one here, though, against a weaker team. I wish he was cheaper, but the matchup does give him some upside. Then we're going to look at Mr. Snell for San Diego. Now, he's probably my favorite pitcher on the slate. In contrast to Gosman, he's only had 3 games under 20 fantasy points since the start of June, and he's facing a team that's very inconsistent and has nice potential to have a bad game, for him to have a good game, I should say. He looks like a great option on the slate, and he was very close to being a core play at pitcher, especially considering there's such a weak amount of options. Then we'll look at Andrew Abbott for um, the Reds. I do like a few San Francisco bats today, but he does have fantasy big time upside here. His K rate has been flashy at times, and that does draw him some utility. He has been somewhat inconsistent though, and so that is high risk, high reward. But as you can see, he's had a couple games where he's had 30 fantasy point plus games a lot, and he's capable of that. He even had one against San Francisco earlier this year where he had 6 strikeouts and had a shutout. So I think he's definitely viable on the slate, but he is somewhat risky. Then we'll look at Maeda for Minnesota. He's had some big games as of late. A 15 to 20 fantasy point game should be doable here. The bigger issue here is the K rate, which he tends to lack and has a lack of striking out. And then he's also facing Cleveland, who doesn't strike out as much as some other teams. So I do think that is a little bit of a concern on this particular slate. But he should be able to limit the earned runs and stuff like that today. Though he's a little bit expensive than I would like, but he's still viable here. Then we'll look at Wu for Seattle. Now he has been very inconsistent, obviously, but he is capable of 15 to 20 fantasy point games. Sorry, his floor is awful though. He's had some good games and he's facing a terrible team, but he does feel Hail Mary-ish today, as he definitely doesn't have a great earned run average, and he does tend to give up some home runs and stuff. So he is capable though of this in this particular situation. Then we'll look at Grayson Rodriguez for the Baltimore Orioles. Now he has a really good matchup here against the White Sox. He's got some nice upside here. He's been decent over his last 6 starts. A 15 to 25 fantasy point game is probably really in the cards. He's had quite a few quality starts in a row, and I do think he's viable here. Though I would say on the low end that he's probably more likely to get a 15 to 20 point game, as he's is much more likely. If he can limit the earned runs and get over 6 strikeouts, that would definitely pay off here as well. And then we'll look at Oviedo for Pittsburgh. Now, in 6 starts, he's had 4 games over 20 fantasy points, including 4 wins. His other 2 games were 1 fantasy point each. If he can limit the earned runs here, he'll definitely be viable, as he's had some really good games and has some solid upside. However, the high risk, high reward nature, he is facing a weak team, though, that gives him some utility, and so I think he's a viable option on the slate, though he is high risk. Let's go and get into our catchers here. We're going to start with Sean Murphy for Atlanta. If he draws a start today, he's going to be very popular. Atlanta is going to be super popular today with their bats, simply because they're in Colorado. Now, he's been a little bit of a slump with a 200 batting average over the last 10 games. Still managed 2 home runs in that stretch. He's not a huge strikeout guy, just 1 strikeout a game about. He has nice potential here, and just like every player on Atlanta does today, they're going to be a very popular stack, and just figuring out how you're going to stack them today is really going to be the way to figure it out. Will Smith for the Dodgers also in play, very similar in batting average recently, but he does have that home run upside, and he does draw some nice utility on this particular slate, though he doesn't have the best matchup. I like Murphy quite a bit better, but he's a good contrarian option off of him. Then we'll look at Yanier Diaz, who can also play at first base. At $4,200, he's a pretty good price here. He's also hitting the ball very well with 350 batting average the last 10. I do like his potential today. He draws good home run upside and he has great metrics for this game. He's been hitting the ball very well throughout the season. And then for a contrarian option off of him, Salvador Perez for Kansas City. Now he's been very boomer bust lately. His batting average has not been great the last 10 games, but he has some capability today with home run metrics, so he's a good alternative to Diaz if you want to go that route. Moving to first base, excuse me. We're going to look at Matt Olson first for Atlanta. Obviously, like I mentioned, Atlanta's going to be super popular today. He's also been a little bit slumpy the last few games, but he does draw a good home run upside, and he's had 43 home runs on the season, so this is a perfect situation for him to have another home run. Then we're going to look at Vlad Jr. for Toronto. Now, he's a little bit cheaper than Olsen, and that's going to be definitely helpful today. He's also hitting the ball very well now with a 316 average over the last 10. He draws some nice metrics here and home run upside. As long as he's hitting well, he's somebody I consider. He's been high risk, high reward throughout the season, but right now he's hitting well, so he's definitely in play. Then we'll look at Jose Abreu for Houston. Now, he's an interesting spot today as he's hitting the ball pretty well throughout the season, but he's been a little bit risky with the home runs or lack of them sometimes. But he is capable of a home run today, and while he is striking out a little too much, he definitely has some potential today, though he's just been streaky throughout the season. Then we'll look at Brandon Belt for Toronto, also a good contrarian option here. He's hit the ball really good for power the last few games. He's got 4 home runs over the last 10. His batting average is still down, but he's definitely capable of a big game, and he's nice and cheap, which gives him a lot of utility here. Moving to second base, we're going to start with Altuve, who's been extremely good throughout the season so far, and he's hitting the ball pretty well. He draws stolen base and home run potential, though his last few games have been a little bit weaker. He has managed to score fantasy points just the same. He has multiple hit potential as well, so he's nice upside today. Excuse me. Then we'll look at Mookie Betts, who can play in the outfield as well. He's been extremely crazy lately with a 550 batting average over the last 10 games. 22 hits in that stretch, 4 home runs, a couple stolen bases included. He's just scored lots and lots and lots of fantasy points, and he's still $6,600, so he's very expensive, but he is capable of having a great game today, and he's a good option in the outfield as well, where you can kind of mix and match how you want to put him around. Von Grisham is a good way to kind of fit into the Braves today as he's pretty cheap. I wish he was a little bit cheaper, but he's pretty cheap. He's got, good potential today for a decent game. Excuse me. He's had a couple of good games in a row where he's had 8 and 12 fantasy points. He's definitely capable of big games as he does have good fantasy output typically when he does start. So I do like his potential today, but he is a little risky. But if you're gonna go with some cheaper guys on Atlanta, he's one of the only guys that you can get under $5,000. So he's definitely a possibility, a good option today. And I do think he's a core play because of his price. Then we'll look at Jorge Polanco, who's hitting the ball very well with a 315 batting average over the last 10, including 2 home runs. He has nice potential here. He's a little bit pricier than I typically like him to be, but he is in play today as Minnesota is in a plus matchup here against Cleveland, and I do think he's a viable option. His teammate Julian is also in play now. Obviously, Polanco can play other positions, but Julian can't. He can only play at second base, but he's hitting the ball very well. He has some good potential today, and even a little bit of home run upside on this particular slate with good metrics for that. In third base, we're going to start with Austin Riley, another Atlanta Brave, if you can believe it. They're playing in Colorado today, so the home runs are going to be a potential massive game from that perspective. Could be a lot of guys on Atlanta hit home runs today. They have really good upside, and they're facing Gomber from Colorado, so we have really good potential today. Though another guy like Riley is not hitting all that particularly well the last 10 games or so. He's only 194 for the last 10. That doesn't change the fact that he's in a great position and he doesn't strike out a ton most of the time. So I do think he's a viable option on the slate. Has good potential to have a good game. Rafael Devers is in play as a contrarian option. Now he is high risk, high reward, and he's been a little bit banged up. So we'll have to wait and see if he's going to play today. But if he does play, he'll be somebody I would consider as he'll have home run metrics. He's also been extremely good recently, but you want to make sure he's good to go on this front. Jorge Polanco can also play here at third base. And then we'll look at Eugenio Suarez for Seattle. Now, he has been up and down throughout the season, but he definitely draws some good potential for home runs. And he's hitting the ball pretty well recently with 270 average. He has managed to score some good fantasy point games as well because he's getting some RBIs. And Seattle's doing pretty good lately, so I think he's a viable option here, and he's capable of a good game. And then Wilmer Flores for San Francisco. Now, he's high risk, high reward. He can play first base as well, but I only think he's real viable here at third as there's too many good options at first. But he is a very good option today. He's hit 3 home runs in the last 10 games, and he's hitting the ball pretty well throughout the season, and so he draws some good metrics here. Moving to shortstops, we're going to start with Mr. Seager for Texas. Now, I do like Texas okay today. They don't really jump up the pages crazy good, but he's been very good throughout the season. He's been a little bit slumpy for him, just a 260 batting average over the last 10 games, but some other guys kill for that average. He doesn't strike out much, and he's getting home run potential today. He's got 24 home runs in 70 and 87 games on the season. He's very expensive, obviously, but he is capable of a big game here, and so he's high risk, high reward. Bobby Witt has been in a really good place for a while as he's hitting the ball very well recently. I do like his home run potential today and his stolen base upside today as well. And he's a little bit cheaper than Seager, so he's a good kind of contrarian option. You can also use Von Grisham here at shortstop, who can also play at second base. And then lastly, Jeremy Pena, who is a core play for me, I think. For Houston, he's hitting the ball very well recently with a 361 batting average over the last 10 games. He's got some home run upside. It's not the most home run upside, but he's having big good games even without the home runs, as he's able to score fantasy points in lots of different ways. He even had a 5-hit game in the last game. So he's definitely capable of a big game. Moving to outfielders, we're going to start with Acuna, who I wanted to make a core play today because he's in Colorado, but he is $7,000. How long has it been since I've seen a player over $7,000 on DraftKings? I'm not sure, but he is very expensive, but he's very capable of an absolutely monster game as well. His metrics jump off the charts today as a great option, but with his price, he's going to be somewhat hard to roster, especially when you have Julio Rodriguez, who's hitting the ball for 532 over the last 10 games with 4 home runs and 7 stolen bases in that stretch, $1,000 cheaper than him. He is a great option on the slate as well. He has really nice metrics today, and I like his upside and home run potential. Uh, who I already mentioned at second base, he can play here in the outfield. Christian Yelich is also in play for Milwaukee as he's hitting the ball inconsistent, but he does draw home run metrics for this game. I do think he's a very boomer bust play and kind of a contrarian option on the slate. Then we'll look at Toscar Hernandez for Seattle. Now, he has hit the ball for 400 and with 4 home runs over the last 10 games. He does strike out a lot, but he definitely has some potential today for a good game as he's hitting home runs in bunches, and he's actually hitting the ball very well the last week or so. Look at all these multi-hit games he's had. So he's in a great spot here. I think he's a great option on the slate and probably and one of my core plays for this one. Chase McCormick also in play for Houston as he's hit the ball pretty inconsistent throughout the year, but he's okay. He has home run potential today, so that's why I have him on here. And then finally, Marcell Ozuna. Now he's overpriced, just to be clear, as he's $5,100, but he's hitting 457 over the last 10 games, and he draws great home run metrics here as when he's hitting the ball well, he's one of the most dangerous home run hitters available, but he's been inconsistent throughout the season. But right now he's hitting well, and he's in Colorado, so I do have some sub $3,000 options for you as well. So Austin Slater is $3,000 as for in the outfield. Rowdy Tellez is from Milwaukee is at first base at $2,400. Dan Vogelbach is $3,000 for the Mets at first base, and then Jake Myers $2,400 for Houston in outfield, and then Jose Caballero for Seattle $2,600, and you can play second base or shortstop. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.